Hello, folks. I'm Bradley J, and we're with Michael Coyne this morning. Unlike usually, I'm going to cut the small talk and get pretty much right down to business. But good morning. Michael Coyne is the Dean of the Massachusetts School of Law and looking mighty fine this morning, sir.
Yeah, good day. How are you today?
I am well, and I'm liking this weather this summer. Not too hot. It looked rough in the beginning, but I'm liking this cool weather. And since our last chat, things have snuck up on us. There's Britney Spears' conservatorship, which goes beyond pop culture into the legal realm. Actually, it has for some time. And then there's the mandatory vaccination situation, which looks more and more like it's going to be a thing. And then also what's going on with the Supreme Court. So first, let's talk about Britney Spears and conservatorship. I guess we can start by asking what a conservatorship is and how is it applied to her?
A conservatorship is an appointment by the court because someone is incapable of making the correct choices or aware of their surroundings and the like, such that they're not considered competent to make mostly, and conservatorship is generally personal choices, but it also deals with financial choices in the situation of Britney Spears. So in many states, there's a separation between conservatorship, which is for money and financial decisions, and guardians who take care of the person. So they would look to make medical decisions and things like that. In the Britney Spears case, when we're using the word conservatorship, we're talking about both her personal healthcare decisions as well as financial decisions. And obviously, with someone like Britney Spears, the money that's involved is significant. And so everyone, all the attorneys, all of the experts with respect to medicine and everything else are all being paid through her funds. And she's saying, enough is enough. I can make my own decisions here. I'm entitled to make some of my own medical decisions. And I don't need this conservatorship any longer. And so that's why we're seeing so much pressure at this point brought to bear on trying to terminate the conservatorship that she is under.
What bar has to be either surmounted or gone under to get you hooked up in a conservatorship? What do you have to do wrong? And what was her situation that landed her in this conservatorship?
Yeah, you're saying the person isn't competent, legally competent to be making these decisions, so that then she's at risk of being taken advantage of. In a lot of cases, it's used in elderly people who, because of cognitive difficulties or otherwise, they no longer can make those informed decisions with respect to their personal care. In her case, and this happens in cases oftentimes with younger people, it's because of either addiction issues or other medical conditions, mental health issues and the like, that they are incapable of making those decisions, so that the court feels they're either at a risk to themselves or at a risk from being taken advantage of here. And that's what happened in this case. If you go way back and think about it, she had a couple of kids. Some argue that, well, some of this, the mental health issues could be attributed to postpartum depression and the like. There's also some issues with respect to drug and alcohol abuse that led to this. And so when that conservatorship was sought, I think nearly 13 years ago, the people seeking to obtain it would have had to show that she's incompetent of making these vital life decisions and her financial decisions, such that she would be taken advantage of. And like many other, child actors and the like, and performers, she would end up destitute, on drugs, or dead by the time she reached this age. So there was some concern that conservatorship was needed. And back then, because of the turmoil and likely her mental state, she really didn't oppose it, and in fact cooperated with that process to try and get the help that she needed. And so her father was appointed, but there's other financial advisors that then came into play as well.
Seems like there are a lot of people who have a financial stake in keeping the conservatorship going. But
Oh,
how vulnerable are we all to that? What if a family member of mine decided, I want his money?
yeah.
My family members can get together and say, that person's crazy. We want to be their conservator. How vulnerable are we all to that?
The standard actually is quite high for the court to determine that you're incompetent, medically incompetent to be able to make these decisions. Personal choice is important to all of us, and it's embodied in the Constitution and the like. So the standard is quite high. So we're not oftentimes subject to that risk. Most of us aren't. But and think about it as we walk around the streets, or we think about our own family situations. Many of us have people that have some mental health issues, but that doesn't mean that they're incompetent to make those decisions. They may not be good decisions, but all of us make bad decisions.
Mhm.
So oftentimes what you're looking at in order to have a conservatorship appointed and approved by the court, the standard is quite high, and it is quite high here. The problem is, at least from the initial stages here, she acquiesced in the process and allowed the initial conservatorship to be established. And so there's some question about her mental stability now. Most people aren't at risk, but as we age or as we face certain cognitive difficulties, or drug addiction issues and the like, we could be, or a loved one could be determined to not have the capacity to be able to make these proper choices, either about their personal care or their finances. And under those circumstances, the probate court would be inclined to appoint someone to act on your behalf. And that's, as you point out, where the problem comes in, because not only is the conservator entitled to be paid, so are the lawyers for the conservator entitled to be paid. The assets then will be gathered up and then managed. So we're talking about someone now needs to manage the assets and the like. There's an awful lot of people drawing on those funds. And the funds, as Britney Spears is pointing out, these are my earnings. All of this is my talent that generated this, continues to generate it. And why shouldn't I be allowed to make those choices at this point, if in fact, as she claims, she's competent?
Can she hire lawyers to battle the conservators' lawyers? If
Yes.
and where does she get the funds to do that? She'd probably have to find a lawyer that would work on spec.
Well, see, and that's the interesting thing. Because she has the conservatorship appointed now, she even needs the court's approval to hire an attorney that she feels comfortable with will represent her interests.
That seems backwards.
Even though it's her money that will pay for that lawyer, but because she can't, isn't competent to make a decision to enter into the contract, at least as the court sees it under the conservatorship, she needs their approval to do it. Now, she recently received that approval, and it will be her funds that will pay for this lawyer. But again, what we have, if you start to look at the pleadings in this case, is so we have another group of high-priced lawyers that are going to be draining down her resources, when this all was designed to try and protect her resources. Now, this is not to say that there isn't some merit in having the conservator. Many people have questioned her dad and saying he's making a lot of money off this, and this is his, he's destroying her assets. I've looked at the pleadings, that his numbers, what he's taken in an annual compensation for managing all of this in her life is my recollection is it's about a couple $100,000. Now that sounds like a lot of money, but the lawyers are charging nearly 7 figures in this case on an annual basis for being back in and out of court and arguing before the court. And not only, does she pay for her own lawyer, she's paying for the lawyers for the conservator who she's opposing. So the lawyers' fees are outrageous in this case. And that's the question she asks is, well, why, if we're wasting all this money in essence, why can't I decide to waste the money as I would choose if I chose that? And what the court is saying, in essence, is, well, then let's have a physical and mental exam and make sure you're competent to make these choices. And that's the interesting thing from my standpoint, because she won't agree to have that competency examination, which to me is kind of silly under the circumstances, because we know she has funds, we know she has connections, and now she's got some power in the process. Um, when we're litigating cases, as that's what this is at this point, you're always going to be able to find an expert to say to advocate or to support the position you want. And so she has the resources to find doctors who would testify to the court that in all likelihood she's competent. I don't know why she doesn't take the next step and do just that, accept the invitation of the court to say, okay, well, provide us the medical support so that says you're competent, because that the onus is now on her in seeking dissolution of the conservatorship to have the court to show to the court she's competent. She could find a friendly doctor to testify that she's sufficiently competent to be able to make these choices in all likelihood. She has the financial resources to do it. She now has the advocate to do it. That would be the logical next step, in my opinion, for her to undertake.
So are you thinking that possibly she has grown comfortable with the situation, really, and is afraid to get out of the situation because it's kind of a comfort zone? She doesn't really want to have to manage stuff on her own. And recent behavior, like topless behavior, is that designed to kind of throw this effort to get out of the conservatorship under the bus?
Well, I'm a lawyer, not a psychiatrist. So I'm not sure what all of the actions are designed to do, and whether she truly does want the freedom and potentially the risk that making her own choices would bring. But that is the concern of her dad and the other professionals, is that she may not have a good judgment. She's no longer a teenager. She's an adult, and she has such significant assets that it really would be another tragedy if at this point the conservatorship is terminated and in 2 or 3 years we see a Whitney Houston situation or something along those lines, where the opportunity to protect her was squandered. But as my daughter tells me, there's a lot to be said for her being able to make her own choices, good or bad, and then live with the consequences of that. I would just like, and I think the court would like, some assurance from medical personnel that she is sufficiently competent, able to make those choices. I don't think the bar is that high. None of us have to be perfect. None of us have to have, all the wisdom in the world. We see that on a daily basis all around us.
Yeah. I mean, the news is filled with people making bad choices who are not in conservatorships.
And many of them are in Congress, but go ahead.
When I went to college, freshman year, psychology, really the entire thrust of the guy's point was never get into the psychological system if you can avoid it. Because once you're in there, you're viewed differently and it's hard to get out. And it seems like it's a similar situation. She's judged by an entirely different set of standards and rules now that she's in the system. For her to do things that we would all do, and it would just be bad judgment for her. It's you're stuck in the system now because of that. So it seems tough to get out once you get in.
I think that's absolutely terrific advice. And not only is it true, but look at the standard that's now applied. Instead of the conservator having to show she's incompetent on a continuing basis, she now has to come forward with evidence to show she's competent in order to remove the conservator. So the burden of proof has shifted now from the person who wanted the conservatorship initially to the person who wants to get out from under it. That's odd in our system. Normally, the defendant, in essence, doesn't have the burden of proof, but that's what she has here. And that does make it a little harder for her. But again, I would, if I were her counsel, and I know she's recently hired able counsel, that I would be seeking the medical assistance that would support the dissolution of the conservatorship. And I think she could find it. I wonder now if it's just the opposition to any procedure, any cooperation with the process, that's stopping that next step. And it may be, as you suggest, is that, well, she knows she needs to be talking about dissolution, and she knows that the public now supports that, but maybe freedom isn't such a good thing if I am worried about those people around me taking advantage of it.
Right. It's possible that she just likes to be famous and usually is using the conservatorship and a fake desire to get out, to get in the news. And then she just ruins that by behaving wildly. Anyway, we need to move on to mandatory vaccinations. The Delta strain of the coronavirus is out there, and it's very, very easily transmitted. People are hesitant to get vaccinations, and that's a big part of the problem. The president is coming up with incentives, both positive and negative, to get vaccinated. But at the end of the day, they might consider mandatory vaccinations. What's the legal case for and against mandatory vaccinating?
The law is very strong with respect to the right of employers and others to require mandatory vaccinations because of the pandemic. It goes back to a case around the turn of the last century called Jacobson, and it was a Massachusetts case. And it was, my recollection is the smallpox vaccine at the time. But there was another outbreak of a horribly tragic disease like this, and they required vaccination. And the Supreme Court looked at it, and some would argue, well, that was a different time. If the Supreme Court looked at it today, they might see it otherwise. I don't believe that's true. I think the law heavily supports the rights of employers and our government to require a mandatory vaccine when you look at the consequences, in this case, of not being vaccinated and draining our healthcare system down, where as the death toll mounts and as the hospitalizations mount, what that means is there'll be fewer and fewer of those spots available for people, as if the trend, as we're seeing right now, continues to increase, requiring hospitalizations and the like. So the law heavily favors it and supports it, and I think that is what we're seeing over the course of the last couple of weeks, is more private employers requiring it, as well as government entities now taking a harder look at why shouldn't we require it. I think now that the federal government has required it for the most part with respect to either that or much more frequent testing by those individuals, I think you'll now start to see more municipalities also follow suit with respect to mandatory vaccination. I mean, the science appears to be that we have not gotten ahead of this at this point, and Delta is rapidly approaching yet another surge in a pandemic levels that we saw long ago. I think you're likely to see more mandatory vaccinations imposed because our numbers are just not where they need to be. Right. Now, with that said, people will still be able to try and obtain a medical or religious exemption from those requirements. But when they do, if in fact they're granted, what they're likely going to find is what the federal government just enacted is, well, then you're going to need a negative COVID test at least weekly or every 2 weeks, as well as masking and social distancing requirements for even those that have exemptions, because you do need to make exemptions for those where the medicine is contraindicated. And there are some situations where this vaccine does not make sense for people with specific medical conditions. And there are also some religious exemptions, but even the religious exemptions are becoming harder and harder to find as more long-established religious organizations are saying there's a moral obligation to get the vaccination to protect our communities.
It's a tough thing. We are the United States of America, based on personal freedoms, really, from right out of the gate. And I understand not trusting the government, and I understand not trusting big pharma. I mean, when it comes to the government, look what they did with the nuclear testing and other various tests on human beings without telling them. And then as far as big pharma, their job is to make money, really. And I get all that, but on the other hand, vaccines work. Measles were wiped out pretty much by a vaccination. There's no way around it. They work. So I get the vaccination. But I hesitate to say that you got to do this. You have to do that. We have to inject something in your arm that you don't want, even though you're an American. That's a tough thing to tell people. Of course, there's the whole, well, that's both the personal freedom and then the whole who you support politically factor. I would hope that would start to fade away, but I don't know.
You know
I'm
what?
glad I have my the moment I got my vaccination, I felt emancipated, and I don't understand why other people don't feel that, but of course everybody's entitled to their own feeling.
Yeah, I don't get that either, because you're right. The sense of freedom and being able, I had a grandchild born during this period and hardly got to touch him for 9 months or so. So I don't understand that either. But I want to address something that hit me while I was at the beach on the personal freedom issue and the distrust level that is present now compared to when we were little. Now, I'm much older than you. But, my wife and I were talking about this. I remember when we were in grammar school, we used to just line up. They'd give us a little Dixie cup full of, I forget what the vaccine was. I don't know whether it was polio, smallpox, or God knows what. We would just line up, go take it, throw it back, and go back to our seat in class. And it was like, well, they told us we had to do it.
You think you're older than I am, but I don't think so, because I had the same thing. I drank out of the little tiny medicinal paper cup. We went to the hospital. Just drink that. And that was polio, right? No, what was that?
I don't know. And remember, the other thing is, remember they used to shoot, and I looked this one up too. They used to shoot something into our arm, so it left a scar there. And
Right.
and I forget which vaccine that was, but no one said anything. We did what they told us to do because we were protecting others.
Yeah.
And now it's all, I should get to do what I want. My body's a temple. And I get some of that, and I do understand the concern about should we trust the drug companies because they are in it for profit. But at the same point, where is the sense of community and even self-protection that used to exist when we were much younger, and sort of doing what you were told because it was good for you? Is that because of post-Vietnam or post-Iraq that we know enough now that we need to have some level of distrust of our government? Or has that swung so far the other way that now it's, well, you got to trust them sometimes because this is the only way we can preserve ourselves?
One final thing on that. This goes to the basic right. Is it the legal term prima facie right? You have a right to do the thing you want to do as long as it doesn't hurt somebody else. You can move your arm. You're free to move your arm anywhere you want until it smacks somebody in the face. That's where that right ends. And this is kind of an example of that.
Well, right. We have a whole bunch of laws that are designed to protect society. And we know the risk to society and to the individual without getting vaccinated here and protecting yourself against the virus. I know there's some level of distrust of the science, but what is it, 80%? I mean, 90%, 95%? There's a small percent that disagree with the science. Well, you can always find someone to disagree with some proposition, no matter how valid and supported it is. To me, that the science here strongly supports it. And it, yes, there's a chance with taking the vaccine. Some have had adverse reactions to it, minor. They're, for, at least in my circle, minor, but there have been adverse reactions. But at the same point, you've got to use your common sense and use your good judgment. If you want to find support out on the internet for any position, you can find it. This is going to get more dangerous for the unvaccinated before we're done here, unfortunately.
Let's get to the Supreme Court. What's on their docket that we need to be thinking about?
Well, I think what's on the docket is more of a political issue than anything else. And it's come to the time where we're again looking at, should there be mandatory retirement ages for our Supreme Court judges? And the reason this comes up again is because of the question about, is Biden going to get a chance to appoint any members to the court as Trump did? Trump appointed 3 members to the court during his one term because they controlled both they controlled the Senate and the corner office, so they could appoint them. But what the real question for me comes is, why do we give Supreme Court justices lifetime appointments? Most states, Massachusetts and other states, at 70 years of age, you're required to retire. In Mass, you could potentially be a recall justice, meaning they could use you if there's a need, but for the most part, you're done at 70 years old. And why on the Supreme Court don't we have a similar requirement? Justice Breyer is now 82 years old. We have 3 judges that are over 70, 3 that are over 60. The fact is that shouldn't we, like many other states, require our Supreme Court justices to retire at a reasonable age and allow the whoever the president is at that time to appoint others to the bench?
Right.
And that's what you're seeing gain momentum, because there are some pushing Justice Breyer to retire so that the Biden and the Democrats will have an appointment where they control the Senate this year. And Breyer doesn't seem inclined to move along. But at the same point, the question then comes is, he's 82 years old. That's
What's wrong with these people? Don't they want to retire? Why would you want to continue to do that? Is it ego? What's the deal with that?
Oh, isn't it everything? It's position, it's power, it's ego. It's the ability to have a significant voice on major matters affecting the United States. There's a lot at stake there, if you think about it. And as you point out, the ego, only I can fulfill this job as well as I can. The fact is that, we need to revisit this issue. And the problem is it becomes a very political issue because, well, let's, look at, if we picked, you got to retire at 70, well, then right now, President Biden would have 3 appointments to the court. So you can't say unilaterally like that. What you can do, at least to me, is philosophically, let's agree on that there should be a retirement age, and that as these judges either leave or die, that the next judges, the retirement age will be 70.
So these guys, these folks are grandfathered in.
Yeah. Huh?
These folks are grandfathered in.
And that's you'd have to, because politically you'd be giving up too many appointments, because someone can do the math and figure out when this would fall. But that's the other part of it. Some of these judges, Trump's last 3 judges, 49, 53, and 56. They, even if you pick 70 years of age, they've got a long tenure on the Supreme Court, assuming they live long and don't choose to voluntarily leave. So you still have time for that 70 to take effect there. The problem is the others are much more rapidly approaching, and some are already well beyond that retirement age. And so that's the real hubbub about the Supreme Court right now, is why shouldn't there be a mandatory retirement? And to me, it's a no-brainer. I think there should be. And the fact is, I think we would benefit from it. You'd see more turnover there on a regular basis. I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg shouldn't have been allowed to serve well into her 80s either. The fact is, there is an issue about both our physical and mental health as abilities, I should say, as we get well into our 80s.
Not only that, you become clueless about the society over which you are making the rules. They don't know. A lot of those folks don't know what, I shouldn't say a lot. It's tough to keep up. And especially when you're 86, a lot has changed since you've been there, and you may not be qualified to be making these decisions. Even if you're physically healthy, you're just out of the loop.
And it's not just that, as you point out. The fact is, why would you stay? Well, I get security, I get a driver, I get to be invited and go to the nicest places in town. The fact is, it's a lifestyle that would be hard to walk away from, where you have such an important voice, to all of a sudden be sitting around the house watching Judge Judy. It, right? It's
Yeah,
not,
well, yes,
not the
absolutely.
same. So, but beyond that, I think the Supreme Court will have a busy year. They don't take that many cases, but there will be some additional issues with respect to um, health insurance and the like on the agenda. We haven't seen the full docket yet. That will start October 1, when the new term sets, and there's still time that Breyer might choose to walk away before then. But at this point now, they're assembling the docket and looking at the cases. The one that will be quite interesting for those of us around here will be the Saneyev, the marathon bombing case, where the court will revisit the appellate court's decision as to whether the death penalty is warranted, or should there be a new trial on the penalty phase of the case, because of errors made during that phase of the trial.
One quick thing before we go.
Sure.
The January 6th folks who have been charged and are in jail, how many are in jail, and are their charges significant, and is their life going to be miserable from here on out? Either way.
Well, I think the charges are significant. I think their life will be miserable in many circles after this. But there'll be some circles where, and already they are seen as heroes and patriots, and people who are standing up to the wretches and the abuses of our government. It's like everything else in society as we stand here now. There's 30% on each extreme, and then there's 40% in the middle who I think are using better judgment, and sometimes we're right and sometimes we go left. But the fact is that these charges will likely continue to result in further incarceration of these people for 1, 3, 5 years. But even being in jail while the charges are pending, because you're considered a danger to the community, no one should minimize the loss of liberty and the restrictions and the pain of being in jail even for a week. So the fact is, all of these folks have had their freedom severely limited, and it is not just an uncomfortable situation that they're experiencing. It's a very difficult. It's depressing. We see a lot of mental health issues that arise in prison, and the conditions and the individual safety in any prison is not the best. And so even being incarcerated pending the ultimate trial of the case is a significant imposition on their lives. My guess is they're suffering not just personally, but financially at home as well. And so hopefully those cases will come to trial reasonably soon, because you have a right to a speedy trial in the United States. But even if they come to trial reasonably soon, they're not likely to be released. They're likely to be, once convicted, to have to serve additional time there, whether it's a year or more. The likelihood is they will be incarcerated for some significant period of time.
So there already have been significant consequences, regardless of what happens in the future.
There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. To be sitting in prison, even for well, this is January. So what are we now in? We're nearly in August.
6 or 7 months. Yeah.
Of waiting trial. That don't blink that away and not think that's significant. If you or I were sent up to Middleton, even where the sheriff is the nicest guy in the world, or Middlesex, where Sheriff Katugian is the nicest guy in the world, they're not pleasant experience. They're not just not pleasant. That minimizes it far too much. They're incredibly burdensome experiences and painful, and there's real physical and mental risk at being incarcerated, even for what some would argue is a short period of time.
Beautiful. Dean Coyne, Massachusetts School of Law. I want you to get out there and enjoy this beautiful summer.
I'm going
Catch some
to.
more fish. I bet you've already caught a keeper, right?
I bet I haven't caught a striper yet. I have caught some freshwater bass,
All
but
right.
I do need my nice big keeper striper that I can feel like, as I always said when my son and I used to go, it feels like a lightning bolt has hit your line when that big striper gets on, doesn't it?
Well, I have to admit, I've never really had a big one on there. I'm terrible fisher person. I guess I don't go where the fish are. I know you need to go to the Cape Cod Canal. That's where all the big fish are, right?
Oh, they were. But when I was down there this year, I didn't see many landed to the shore, and I only went to the canal a couple times, and I went for a bike ride, so I wasn't fishing. But I didn't like one year. They were just throwing them in and pulling them out. This year it seemed a little slower, but I don't know. Maybe you'll have some Cape Cod Canal fishermen
Maybe.
call in and tell you otherwise.
The biggest thing I had on the line was a big bluefish, and that was a significant amount of fun. All right, man. You take care. I'll see you
See you,
soon.
brother.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.